You're on. Okay, another short video on basically uh, what's the average person gonna do nowadays? How are you gonna survive? You've got YouTube, and there must be at least 125 different people out there blaming the banks, blaming the politicians, but they don't have an answer on what you do. Well, what you do is you sit down for a minute and consider your position, where you're at, where you're located at, real estate, location, location, location. And Dr. Maslow's pyramid of human needs. You need to be clothed, secure. You need to have security. You need to have food, water, energy, resources of some kind. And nowadays, you have to have this thing called money. Well, the last generation, the last 30 years, the educational system has not trained anybody to be able to make a living. They haven't. And here's where my generation was really blessed because I went to high school in the 50s, and you were either general aviation, vocational aviation, or you were setting yourself up for college, or your parents were. Anyway, you had a mentor somewhere that said you're going to go into college, and if you didn't have the money, you had the different armed forces. They might train you to be a baby killer, and but on the other hand, they train you to be a pilot. They'll train you to be logistics. They'll train you to type. I mean, there were lots of good jobs around because they still had to have people that did the jobs, and they basically, you were accepted if you were always looking for work, you know. So I was prepared to be a machinist, and in those days, North American Aviation, Rockwell, people like that, to be a machinist, you could make a living. Your family, you could afford a family, uh, and people were doing just that. And that was technology. Technology was moving along, but technology is moving along quite rapidly. And the hard thing is now, how do people in their 40s, they're on their second or third divorce, having paid child support, or the old lady get married again, and he turns out to be a piece of crap and he kicks the shit out of her every time he gets drunk. Uh, and this is happening in America. This is happening in America. And you have to think to yourself, you think to yourself, he said, where do I have anybody that seems to know what they're doing? And they're making a living, they're articulate. So I got into training as a paralegal. But before that, I would always take a job that probably I would talk myself into the job. But 2 or 3 weeks into the job, I pretty well knew what I was doing, at least in explaining it to somebody what I was doing, you know. But a lot of it was backstopped by military, the reserves, when I would make rank, I would go away for training. And I wouldn't say that I had wives that would support me in those days because you're young, dumb, and full of cum, as they used to say. Women are just as bad. They don't know shit from Shallow Creek. How are young people supposed to really find somebody I've got a daughter that's 56 years old now, and she's been a Berlin playgirl for almost all of her life. And she gets mad at me. I said, why don't you find some old Jewish attorney somewhere, somebody with some money? And you don't need, you've had these boyfriends and, tennis players and what have you. Where are you going to go? Well, I used to ask myself the same question, of course. But you read, and nowadays, I'm sorry, but that's the problem we're facing. America doesn't have anybody that knows shit from Shinola anymore. And the politicians, a politician's job, his first job is? Right, to get elected. He'll do anything to get elected. He'll make any promise to get elected. So, I'm just watching the history of Henry Ford and John Ruther, and the labor unions we used to have. I was never much of a union guy. I'd get the job, make money, and if I could get a 10% raise, I'd change over and do something else. Take the money and run. So I became a paralegal. Became a pretty good paralegal. I had senior paralegal. And I could always get a job almost anywhere with any kind of a little law office. Because most attorneys, when they hang their shingle out, they can't afford to do it. Young attorneys, if they don't get the grade and get picked up by a pretty good sized law office, they're out there, they're schmucks, or they got to find an older attorney that'll show them the ropes and talk about politics and law. Anyway, we had the one thing. Early on, I discovered death and taxes. Death and taxes, and we had a guy named Irwin Schiff. Irwin was the dad of Peter Schiff. And you'll see Peter on here, and they're still harassing Peter. And I met Irwin because in the old days he'd be out to these little conferences and these get-togethers. And I think Peter was actually Irwin was actually having a good time because he studied the tax code, which wasn't anywhere as large as it is now. Oh, it's terrible now. It's terrible. It's enough to cross a rabbi's eyes. But in the old days, Irwin came up with an idea. You didn't have to pay taxes, income taxes. And he proved it. And boy, they were upset at him, but they didn't know what to do about it because he'd studied the law. And he used to say that taxes are voluntary. Well, that's not exactly it, but yes, at first they were voluntary. They couldn't make you pay taxes. Besides that, the common wage earner was not required to pay an income tax. That was created by the same guys that created the Federal Reserve System. And they graduated income tax, which is part of the Communist Manifesto. That's one of their first things they do, I could tell you, I still don't pay any income tax. I haven't paid any income tax for 70 years, and legally. But you've got to know what to say. You've got to know when to fold them and when to hold them. Keep your mouth shut and make them explain to you, because the law is full of taxes or money that is not taxable. I know you don't believe it and you don't want to take the time to look into it, and I would advise you now not to. The other thing is, how much do you have to lose? Everything is based upon credit. You put everything together in your life. And how much do you have to lose? I mean, there's always somebody that would love to take it away from you. Take your business away, take your inventory away, take your life away. Some would just love to put you in jail forever, get you out of the way. And I guess I'd say I was either very cunning, like a fox. Christ never did cuss anybody out exactly, but he did call Herod that old fox. But the word he used was vixen, that old female fox. So you have to make up your mind. I don't know what you're going to do out there today, except that there is a God. There is a God, the Father. He does have a son, and he did send his son on a mission with the gospel, with the good news of what to do and to how to basically get through this phase and get introduced and have a part of the next phase. Now, of course, that's seen as a myth nowadays. It's a myth. But that's the only thing I have to offer to you. I've been extremely lucky, cunning, and I haven't paid any taxes, very few taxes. You incorporate, or you get a trust, or you go to law school and you find out how this system works, and then you sort of ease your way into it. Different court systems that the judges all know. The young attorney over here in the corner, Mr. Atwater, what do you have to say today? I'm just fine, sir. I guess that little. I'd like to submit on something here. Oh, fine, all right. I'll see you down at the golf course later on. That's the way it works. A lot of us are hard-headed, and I could have been killed at least 4 times. Saigon bar fight, stabbed, combat, yeah, and jealous husband. I always thought I was going to be a jealous husband, so. But we're only just very lucky, and I look at all these people that have died, recent movie stars, people like that. I really have to say, I didn't know she was dead. Tina Turner, I didn't know she'd passed away. Yeah. Carlton Heston, everybody, Burt Reynolds, I thought they were just here. And they were. And what's going to happen to them? It says in that day, you'll see the great and the small, the high and the low. Anyway, everybody will be there at a judgment day. Except there's a couple of us that we get our way around it. If we cave in, if we go to our real attorney, our conciliatory, and if we go to our high priest, yeah, he says, don't worry about it. Come on in. He says, come on in. I gotta talk something over with you, but look, I gotta have some cooperation here. All right. You say, well, what do you want me to do? He says, I'll tell you in the Bible here what I want you to do. Now, you want to start in, you're going to need to be some training, and there might be some tough times. You might get scarred up a little bit. But no, I'll keep you around if I can still use you. Anyway, what you want to do is sit down, be quiet, and go to the Lord and said, I don't, we are designed to want to procreate and to survive. We get old enough and we say we've been pretty lucky so far, Lord, but do you have anything that I can do to sort of earn my survival, my salvation? A lot of ministers say, no, there's not a damn thing you can do. You're a sinner and you just forget about it. He says, no. Peter sort of had it. He was, don't forget, on the day of Pentecost, it said that there were about 3,000 to 5,000 righteous men in Jerusalem. Well, they were righteous because they were doing what they'd been instructed to do, and they were there. And then they even asked, look, we've been complying. And he says, fine. He said, but repent and be baptized. In other words, if there's something that you have that you've been worried about, repent. Do good, be baptized, and come on into the club. It's easier than the Freemasons. You don't have to wear a blue rag around your knee. You don't have to say a lot of this, a lot of fooey and dooey, and you don't have to know your way around the temple. But you do have to know your way around God's plan. And that's about what I can tell you for now is slow down, especially in America. Actually, you've got no excuse. Most of us have had a good life in America, especially my generation. You know, American graffiti, that's me. The guy that was in the Pharaohs, that's me. Yeah, just really got by. So that was my age. Lowered cars, got away with it, twice pipes. Good times, tuck and roll, back seat. Unhook a bra with one hand. I'm not bragging, but we're designed this way, you know. There'd be no procreation without a lot of it, so. But we're probably the last decent generation that we weren't necessarily just planned on being evil, you know. There were a lot of people that were evil, and there's been a warfare going on. And one of the things that God is going to do when he stands up and tells Christ, you sit here for a minute, I'm going to make your enemies ashes under your feet. I'm going to make the world your footstool. I'll be right back. Then we and Christ will come riding in like the cavalry, and we'll start to pick up and this mess, clean up the mess. Try to find some remaining Israelites that are still there, and you can actually say the fun will begin, but it's not going to be any fun. Yes, we are going through tribulation. There has always been tribulation. There has always been wars and rumors of wars. There's always been false prophets. You know, John just didn't pop up off the Isle of Patmos, write up a thick book like this. Do you think he talked to anybody? John, where you been? How you been? You know, I've been busy. I wrote this book here, and you want to start to spread it amongst the churches? Well, I guess we will. But did they know what they were looking at? A lot of things mentioned in the Bible that were not really explained. But we in the latter generations, we said we know all that. You know, we know about television amplification, frequency modulation. We know about these things. We know about the shape of the universe. We know this mathematics and these things have been put together. We're in the last generation. Of course, every generation was the last generation. No. God will take care of you as he promised, but he didn't say, I'm going to make it easy on you. You know, you don't make it easy in basic training. You know, what's the saying is, the more training, the more blood you shed in training, the less you'll shed in combat. Anyway, that's what I'm going to be telling you right now, and don't look for this man of perdition. Paul had his own problems. I mean, this guy couldn't keep his mouth shut half the time. There's no telling that he ever met Christ. I mean, it says that Satan himself can appear as an angel of light. Nobody else heard him speak to Paul. Nobody else saw him. And Paul winds up blind, with scales falling off of his eyes. And ask you, what kind of creature in God's green earth has scales fall off their eyes? Serpent, that's right. So I'm going to let you go with this one here. Now, I want to make you a little more comfortable, but you've got to have trust. Trust in the Lord. You tell him, Mike goes out there. Mike told me to trust in you. And Mike told me to come on over to you. Yeah, actually, it's Christ that knocks on your door. He says, I'll knock. If you'll let me in, I'll come in and sup with you. So I always say, better have something you better have some soup and crackers or something to sup with the Lord, and don't invite him in empty-handed. He'll understand, but you tell him you got a problem. You don't want to be selfish and want to survive just for yourself, but you want to be an active part of the plan of God. You tell him I'd like to participate. I used to tell people that all the time. What do you want the job for? I said, I'd like to participate. I'd like to be there. Work for me. I'm here. Okay, I'll talk to you next time. Shalom. Mike Harding, Crestline, California, the Wandering Israelite.